I'm Faith Collis. I'm the Community Relations Director for the Salvation Army. I'm part of your divisional headquarters team. You have some survey forms in front of you, so please do complete those at the end of the session and leave them on the back table. Feel free at any time during the session to grab refreshments. They are here for your taking. And without further ado, let me introduce to you our first presenter, Christina Stepp. Christina is the founder of Clearverb Marketing. Clearverb Marketing is located in Elm Grove, Wisconsin. The firm specializes in promise marketing, working with professional service providers, nonprofits, and community organizations to help their clients explain the services and the experiences they offer to their customers. As far as Clearverb knows, they are the only marketing company in the Milwaukee area that specializes in promise marketing. Clearverb was founded in 2006, and Christina founded this after serving in a variety of in-house and agency positions in Milwaukee. She brings to her clients and to us this afternoon 20 years of experience in consumer retail, wholesale industries, product and service marketing, personnel functions, and event planning. She is an active volunteer. Woo-hoo! We all know how valuable volunteers are. Christina has served on the local board for the March of Dimes for 5 years and on the statewide executive committee for 2 years. She also chaired the Milwaukee Walk America for 2 years, including the 2002 walk, which was one of the only 3 in the United States to exceed the prior year's revenue after the 9/11 tragedy. She is a 2-term past president of the Association for Women in Communications and a current member of the Rotary Club of Milwaukee, as well as a member of Professional Dimensions, where she serves on several committees and the Charitable Fund Board. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Christina.
Thanks for coming. I'm glad you guys are all here. As Faith said, feel free to ask questions at any time. It makes more sense if you ask them when you think of them than waiting until the very end, because by then you are too tired and you don't feel like asking them. And I can't remember what I was saying that prompted the question, so we'll all just do this together. The other thing I want to mention is that if you have just something you want to share, you don't have to ask a question. You can just share an experience that you've had that's related to something that I'm saying. Just because I'm the person up here talking doesn't mean that I am the PR goddess of the universe. I know what I'm talking about, but so do you too. And so we all have things that we can share and we can learn from each other. So this is the page that I show you if we don't have someone nice like Faith who introduces me and pronounces my name correctly and all that stuff. We'll skip that page. These are some of our clients. As Faith mentioned, we work primarily with professional service providers, not-for-profits, and community organizations. So we do a lot of work with a lot of really great causes and healthcare and things like that. And it's really fun. It's nice. I get to do what I love and help the community, which is a pretty cool thing. So today, I am going to talk to you about public relations, but then also I want to talk with you about how community relations has changed in the digital age. Public relations and social media are completely intertwined. Public relations was a precursor to social media. And I know you have a social media session going on today. I am not here to steal that person's thunder or teach the same things. I don't know what they're teaching, but I'm not here to teach that stuff. But I do want to make sure that I talk about the two of them at the same time because they are related. And if you leave with anything, there's 2 things I want you to leave with. One is write a plan, which we're going to talk about that a lot. And the other one is the thought that these 2 things are related. So just to frame everything, when I was working on this presentation, because I didn't know who you were going to be, I made some assumptions. And I assumed that you were all probably trying to work on community relations already. I also assumed that you were already working on gaining media coverage. The other thing I should tell you is you're supposed to have handouts, and you don't. So things like that happen. And hopefully, I can see you're all adults. So you get a jump drive from the conference, and the presentation is on there. So my website is on there. I'm going to reference a number of the documents that would have been included in the handouts. You can download them for free right off my website. So it's not like you're missing out on anything. And if you have a piece of paper, you can write down the things that are important to you. So I think we'll all be fine. So let's talk about what community relations is, just so we're all on the same page. Really what it is it's talking with the community. You want the community to see you as part of their neighborhood, not those guys over there doing something for some people that has nothing to do with me. It's us doing something, we are doing something for us. And so there's a lot of ways that you can make that happen. And one of them is, of course, public relations. And there's a slight difference, but they really are very intertwined, because public relations is communicating without the intent to sell. So most people, when they talk about public relations, they think of that point number 2 up there, earned media. Everybody likes earned media. But really, public relations, in its pure definition, is communicating without the intent to sell. So that would mean, and for today's discussion, I'm going to mention things like newsletters, email, annual reports, events, word of mouth. Even advertising can sometimes be considered public relations if you're not trying to sell something. If it's just image advertising, technically that's public relations. So if the goal is to raise awareness, it's public relations. But we're also going to talk about earned media, because we all like earned media. Earned media is a good thing. We all like to get placements. We all like to get newspaper stories. We all like to be seen on television. Well, maybe we don't like to see ourselves on television, but we like the coverage. And there's a lot of great things about that. I mean, if you don't consider the cost of your time, because there is a time cost to getting it, it's free. And anybody who's ever tried to buy advertising, that's expensive. That money goes really fast. And then you also get the credibility of the publication. It puts you in front of people in the community who may not necessarily be thinking about you or want to know about you, but they are the kind of people who are reading the newspaper or watching television because they want to know what is going on in their community. And you are something that's going on in their community. So it's a good way to get yourself in front of people. It's also a good way to establish yourselves as a successful organization, because people like to be part of something that is successful. Yeah?
I hope I'm not doing this too early.
You can do it whenever you want.
I have a supposition that whenever you are the subject of a news story, part of the particularly younger journalist thing is point counterpoint, where they're going to weigh the good and the bad. Now, that may not apply necessarily to respected charitable organizations, but are there still inherent risks? Is it always adding credibility?
Oh, you are so awesome. Look at that.
Oh,
He's like a mind reader. And we didn't even talk about this. You get to sit in on the next presentation too. But you can see there are risks.
Asleep now, sorry.
And if you look, a lot of people talk about the risks of social media. They get all hung up on, social media is so scary and people can say things. But if you think about it, the risks are exactly the same. You lose control over the message because once you explain something to a journalist, they go back and write the story. So it is very important to have your talking points ready, to know what you want to say, to be able to frame the discussion. And Faith is always available to help you with that, especially if you get into a sticky situation and you don't know what to do. But in social media, people spread the message for you and they can change it. They can retweet you and take some words out. They can do whatever they want. So you lose control there. You can get negative comments. You can have a journalist say something bad about you or misquote you. Generally, journalists are not out to get you. Most of the time, if they misquote you, it's because they didn't understand what you were explaining to them. So it's really important to make sure that you explain yourself clearly. And that's why if you know you're going to be interviewed about something, practice. Write it down. Or if you don't know the answer to something, say, I don't know, I'll get back to you. It's okay to do that, And then with social media, you can have negative comments. That's a disadvantage. It's also kind of an advantage, though, because you can see them and address them right away if you're monitoring. But this isn't the social media session. You can have mistakes, as I mentioned. People make mistakes. Who here in this room has never made a mistake? I've made mistakes. And then, of course, there's that perception of wasted time. Depending on the position of the leaders in your organization, all of this stuff takes time. It takes time to write press releases. It takes time to write follow-up phone calls. There is no guarantee of coverage. So you can spend a lot of time on it and get nothing. And I run into that all the time. I have an agency. People hire us to get coverage. I can, we don't run up the bill on purpose, but, we're doing things and we're reaching out, we're writing these press releases, and if nobody shows up at your event, I tried, and that's a question we get asked when someone says, they say, I'm thinking of hiring you. Can you guarantee coverage? No. I can guarantee what I will do for you, but I cannot guarantee that it will work. And I'm always very upfront with people about that because there is no guarantee. You have to work really hard at it. But the good thing is there is a method to the madness. And so we're going to talk about some writing skills. We're going to talk about how to develop an integrative approach. And of course, then it's also important to be persistent. You have to be able to explain your thoughts and ideas. If you're working on integrating your message, for example, if you're going to repurpose a press release into a newsletter, into an annual report, or a blog posting, or something like that, you have to have some technical skills. You maybe need to know how to deploy that newsletter, or you need to know how to set up a print newsletter, or how to write a press release. How many people in this room golf? How many people? Yeah, so how many people in this room own golf clubs but aren't very good at golfing? Okay, yeah, see? Just because you own golf clubs does not mean you're a good golfer. Just because you have a keyboard doesn't mean you can write a great press release. Just because you have graphic design software does not mean you're a great graphic designer. So use other people on your team to help you, get volunteers to help you, get an intern, whatever it takes. Defer that expertise to someone who's really good at it. Everybody has a skill. Thank God, otherwise there'd be one job and we would all want it, So use a lot of people on your team to try to make that happen, and that does make it easier. So I really want to make sure that we talk about how public relations has changed. I want you to leave today with a new way of thinking about it. It's not just about the press release. We'll talk about press releases, but social media has had a huge influence on public relations. There's a lot more noise out there. There's a million websites. There's Facebook and Twitter and Google Plus and Pinterest and YouTube and I don't know, a whole bunch of others that some I haven't even heard of. So there's a lot more noise out there. Information gets transferred a lot faster. We're a microwave culture now. It's like if anything doesn't happen in 30 seconds, it's too long. So we want things to happen faster. Publications have gotten a lot smaller. I read the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. I get the paper, the physical paper at home. I like reading the physical paper. I think you read it differently when you're holding the paper than you do online. So I read the paper. But there are times when the business section is the last page of the local section because apparently there isn't enough business news in the world. But the papers have gotten a lot smaller, and a lot of that is because of social media. The other thing is that newspaper staffs have gotten a lot younger. I'm sure if you look on the websites, you can see there are a lot of young kids out there doing this. So the good thing, though, is that if you have some skills and you can write a great press release, sometimes they'll just copy and paste it. They won't even spell check it. There's a woman in Milwaukee who covers an event that we do. We do a nonprofit charitable event where we shut down with 2 other agencies and we work for 24 hours and donate all the work. And then she profiles the people that the work goes to, and she puts this little block at the front of the profile that talks about the event called Triadathon. And it's the same block every single time. She never rewrites it. And she spells my name wrong every single time. And I've never bothered to correct her because she spells the agency name right every time at least, so I figure it doesn't really matter. But they're in such a hurry. They just don't have time. And even though, and you have more places to publish, but so do they. A lot of journalists are required to maintain blogs. They're required to tweet. So they're looking for a lot of information, which is good because they need a lot of information. It also means that it's harder to get people to hear that information or to read it or to see it because there's so many places to get it. When I was preparing for this presentation, I looked. And in 1952, when I Love Lucy was on, when her show was on, she got nearly 70% of the viewing audience every time the show was on. Last year, American Idol got 14.5% of the viewing audience. That's the biggest show out there. So the audience is really diluted, which means you have to be in a lot of places all at once. So you can't do anything in silos anymore. It has to be integrated. Now, that makes it hard, but it's also great for you guys in a lot of ways. There's an increased focus on storytelling. There's an increased focus on in-progress communication. You don't have to wait until something is done to start talking about it. You can talk about it as you're working on it. It's okay. You can also have more people from your organization talk. It's not like the head honcho has to be the only voice of the organization anymore. You can have a lot of people talking on your behalf, spreading this information out, which is good because it's a lot of work. And it also helps with the very first form of public relations, which is word of mouth. you know, if you have a lot of people talking. So you have to teach them how to do that, and there has to be a certain level of trust, but it does help. And it's great for nonprofits because you tend to not have a ton of money, or at least not a ton of money for that. So we're going to talk about what makes effective public relations. You need a plan, and the plan has to be tied to your business goals. So you really have to think about what you want, and not, I want more coverage. What do you want that coverage to do for you? Do you want it to result in volunteers? Do you want it to result in donations? What do you want the coverage to do? Because that will tell you what to talk about and where to put that message. You know, it doesn't do you any good if you want more volunteers and you get coverage from a place that their audience isn't the type of person who tends to volunteer for you. You know, if your volunteers tend to be, I don't know, I'm just going to make up something so that it's really segregated, but if your volunteers tend to be mothers, you don't want the sports channel to be talking about you because women don't listen to that station, or the talk radio station, actually. Most women don't listen to talk radio. Most of the women who listen to talk radio are over the age of 65. So you have to think about who you're talking to, and does that fit into the type of people. Now, if you want male volunteers and if you want older women volunteers, talk radio is a great place for you. So you have to think about, what is your goal? What do you actually want? You have to be news focused, and you really have to be consistent. That's one of the biggest challenges every organization faces, both for-profit and nonprofit. And I totally get it. I mean, I have my own business, and there are 4 of us, and there's a lot of times that we're like the shoemaker's kids with no shoes because we can't do our own PR. So because we're so busy doing our client work. So I totally get it, but you can make it happen if you work at it. So first thing is you have to have a plan, and I don't think it has to be this big, hairy, binder kind of plan. It can be simple. It could be 2 pieces of paper, and it should be tied to your goals. You should think about how else you're going to use the message. The best way that I can think of to do the plan really is, I'll do it a lot of times as a bulleted list. December, bing, 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 bing. You know, January, bing, 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 bing. And I just list out what I'm going to do, and you think about, okay, what time of year is it? What are we working on? What's kind of going on in the world? You know, how can we tie it to the holiday that's going on, or whether school is in or out, or the things that are happening in the world. And if you have a plan, it makes it so much easier because you don't have to think, oh my God, what should we do? You've got it planned. You can take that plan and throw it out the window when you get there, but at least you've thought about something. And then think about where else you're going to use the message. Can you write something and then put it in a newsletter, and then put it in an e-newsletter? Can you put it in something else? Can you talk about it at your events? Can you present it at a board meeting or at a community meeting? Can you make out a flyer and send it to the library? Whatever. You know, how else can you use this information so you're using the same message over and over and over again? And then make sure that you talk about it internally. Make sure that everybody knows what you're trying to communicate, because it helps with word of mouth, it helps spread out the workload, and it helps those random sort of serendipity situations occur. If everybody on your team knows what you want, and someone happens to be at a backyard barbecue at somebody's house, and another person just happens to mention something, they know what to say. Because if people don't know what your plan is, they can't recognize opportunities. So it's important to share the plan with everybody. And post it somewhere, and don't put it in a binder and stick it on a shelf. I mean, it can be really a very simple worksheet. The next thing I'm going to show you is it's a tool we developed for social media, but I want to talk about it because it's sort of the same philosophy. And you can download this from my website, so you're totally cool if you actually want it. It's no big deal. So it's called the Ongoing Social Media Strategy Wheel. And it's divided into 2 sections. So the green section is the internal part that most people forget. Everybody jumps right to that outside part because it's a lot more fun. It's a lot more fun to just be creative. You know, I come into meetings all the time and people say to me, so what do you think we should do differently? I don't know. I don't know your organization. You have to think. You know, the creative part is so much better when you put the thinking behind it first. So you need to research, know what your competitors are doing or what else is going on in your area. The example I gave in the last session was last Friday I went to one of those big donor lunch kind of things, you know, where they get 400 people in a room and they show you some tear-jerking stories and they ask you for money. Well, there's 2 of those, 2 big ones that happen at this time of year in Milwaukee. and they happen to be on the same day. And I've been to both of them enough times to know that it's the same audience, because I've been to both of them. And somehow or other, they just didn't check each other's calendars, and they were on the same day. So they both hurt themselves. So research, know what's going on. Make sure you have a strategy. Know who's on your team. Make sure they know what to say. Know who's supposed to do what and when and where. And then listening really has more to do with social media, but read the paper. I'm amazed how many people don't read the paper. Read the paper, so that you know what's going on in your community. And then figure out, position means who do you want to be in the debate? Do you want to be a leader? Do you want to be seen as a hero? Do you want to be seen as a helper or this guiding force? Or how do you want to be seen? And then the recalibrate means go back, and that's a continual cycle. It never ends. The outside part, the participation part, obviously is more for social media. But the other three things are still totally valid. You need to create on a regular basis. You need to manage your communications, and you need to integrate everything. I don't know how many times I've said integrate already, but I'm hoping you guys are getting this. Integrate it all. So when it comes time to try to get coverage, it's important to remember that you need to be news focused. It's the media's job to report news, and they don't all want to report the same story. Television is a little less sensitive to that than newspapers, but we have a couple similar papers in the Milwaukee area, and you need to give them different stories or they get really angry with you, and it's not a good idea to make a journalist angry. But you have to remember that it's not all about the feelings, and the fact that you're doing good isn't the story, and that you have to be more interesting than what's going on in the community. I had a client last year that was scheduled to be on a morning news show in Milwaukee. It's one of those that comes on after the morning news, so it's like one of those little fluffy kind of talk show kind of things. And they flew somebody up from Denver. We were going to be on the show. We're all excited. We meet at the store. We're ready to go. And that was the day, I don't know if any of you are from that area, where the man and the woman decided to park their car on I-94 westbound and not get out for like 5 hours. I don't know if they thought they were going to live there or what, but they would not get out of the car. And I don't remember why that started, but eventually they got them out of the car. Well, needless to say, the show that I was supposed to be on, which was from 9 until 10 o'clock, was completely preempted by news coverage of them showing the car just sitting there. And then finally they got them out. But so anyway, obviously, we were not more interesting than that. Well, I think we were a lot more interesting than that story, but the media didn't. And they came back and did it again, and it was great. But you have to know that that kind of stuff is going to happen. You can plan really hard, and if it snows, or if the Packers do something, or something really bad happens, a tornado, yeah.
Are there any cookbook rules of thumb as to not going to the well? I keep, in terms of Salvation Army, for example, the best coverage is always gotten when you're just short of your goal and it's the holidays and oh my goodness. But it's the same old thing. After about 2 decades of hearing that, I'm surprised that the rookies at the TV station keep showing up. Is there some way to find something other than that sort of immediacy to still engender the coverage? I know it also depends on the news day generally.
Right. Well, I mean, if that works, you should keep doing it even though you're sick of it.
It's hard.
Yeah. But the other thing, and I'll talk about this later, but I can mention it now too, is you can tie to a trend. So, for example, a report comes out that talks about the number of children that don't get any food now that school is out, and you have a school lunch program, your lunch program. So you can tie to that statistic that comes out, because they might be reporting on this, report released by the USDA or something like that, and you can give it that local angle, which makes it a lot more interesting for them. So that's really helpful.
So generally, except for puff pieces, immediacy is always better than feel good?
Yeah,
right.
It is, because to them it feels like news, not profiles, and they want news. The other thing then is consistency. So not just in the number of times you message, we try to send out press releases on a regular basis. I know Faith mentioned in the first presentation that twice a month you try to do something, right? So she tries to send us something twice a month. We don't have like a number like that we use for our clients, but we have a plan, and every month someone is hearing about our clients, and we reach out on a regular basis so that they don't forget that they're there, because they're busy people. The other thing is to make sure, though, that the way you say things and the way you write things is consistent, the way everybody says things and write things is consistent, the way you use your logo is consistent, the way you're presenting everything is consistent, because we're a microwave culture and people only glance at things. And if you only get a glance, you want them to know right away who you are. And if you explain something differently every time, they're not going to recognize you. So it's boring to you, but just say it over and over and over again the same way, because the consistency is really super important.
With the addition of social media, is the mixed media thing still something you try to sell as well? The TV, the radio, the newspaper, if you can engender all those, or is that getting to be less so with all the diffusion?
We try to get wherever we can, plus the social media, if we can. You know, and then, or repurpose the TV coverage into, hey, we were on Channel 4 or whatever. You know, so yeah, we try to be wherever we can. You know, and if you have something big and you can get all of that at the same time, that's wonderful. You have to be lucky or have something really big, you know. And the sad part is that when you have something really, sometimes it's so easy when it shouldn't be. And when you really have something that you want to say, you cannot get anybody to write about. We're working on, there's a thing in Waukesha, which is, if you're not from that area, down by Milwaukee. And they were just named a Gibson Guitar Town. So they're getting these big statues, 10-foot tall guitars that artists are decorating, 30 playable guitars, all being decorated by artists. Everything we send out, they write about. They write about them constantly from Waukesha, yeah. You know, so you see there's tons of coverage on that. I mean,
it's Donut Day, National Donut Day too.
Yeah, I mean, like we can't hardly, like we don't hardly have to do anything, and it's just happening, you know. And then we have other things that we really want them to talk about, and they just like they don't care. And you're thinking, geez, why is that so easy? This is equally important. So it just, you know, you just have to keep trying, I guess, and know that sometimes it's a time suck. There are some things you can do. So the first one, I call it writing backwards. You know, the way we were all taught to write, we were taught to, first you explain the setting, and you introduce your characters, and then something happens to them, and then something really big happens to them, and then the story's over. But the way you write a press release is the way newspapers are written. And if you read a newspaper, all you have to read is the headline in the first sentence, and you know the ending of the story. So they're written backwards. That's not the way we were taught to write, so it's not intuitive, and it's not easy. So what I tell people to do is to sit down and just write the way you would normally write, and then go away, and then come back and read it again and challenge yourself. Am I getting to the point fast enough? Generally, you can take out the entire first paragraph and just go right to the second paragraph. And that's the easiest way to do it. And once you do that more often, you'll get really good at it. But just write, you know, and then just challenge yourself, take it out. The other thing is, when you're writing a press release, if you have something to announce, you don't need to say that you're announcing something, because the press release is an announcement. So you can save yourself a couple words. You know, you don't have to say, the Salvation Army is pleased to announce that they hired Faith Colas. They can say, the Salvation Army hired Faith Colas. Just, you know, it's like when you read an article in a magazine, and they say, the purpose of this article is to just tell me, you know. And the second thing up there is pitching. That's a great thing to do if you have kind of a complicated story that's difficult to explain. You can't get to the point fast enough. If you have a relationship with a reporter where you can just call them up or you can email them. So sometimes I'll call up a reporter and I'll say, hey, it's Christina from Clearburg. Do you have time for a story idea? And that's a great way to start that conversation. Do you have time? Because if the answer is no, then you can say, well, when should I call you back? I mean, it's their job to write stories, and it's my job to pitch them, and you know, we're just doing our job, so I don't have to feel like I'm being slimy and selling them something. I mean, I'm just being very upfront. I have a story idea for you. Do you want it? So that's a great way to start the conversation, because then if the answer is yes, then you just go. And explain what you want, get to the point really fast. I write down my pitches a lot of times. Even though I do this for a living, I still write them down. Maybe not word for word, but I'll write myself a bullet-pointed list just so I know what I'm going to say and I don't forget anything. Or you can do press releases online only. You can write something that you want the world to know about. Maybe it never gets covered, but it goes into your newsroom. Newsroom is a very commonly visited place on a website, so it's a great place to put information about yourselves. So what makes a great story? There's kind of a formula. You're down in your red kettle, that's a good story. But if you're trying to get something a little bigger, usually there's some sort of a problem. Maybe there's a problem in the world that you're trying to solve, or a trend that you're trying to reverse or combat. There's a solution, that's you. You're providing something. A great thing to have as an example, if you can get someone who's benefited from your services to be part of the story. When you see television coverage, when you see newspaper stories, they usually start with, Joe Brown had this problem, blah, blah, blah. That, you have to connect the reporter to that person. So it's great if you can do that. And if you can't, the other thing to include, and this is very painful for some people, but it really is helpful, is to be willing to include your competition. So maybe you have a lunch distribution program over the summer, and so does your local food pantry. Well, you can say to the reporter, oh, the local food pantry does this too. And then it's more of a story, not a profile about the Salvation Army, and it feels more like news to them. And it's better to be half of the story that gets written than all of the story that they won't write.
I have a question. Can't you get in trouble bringing somebody else into the story without their permission?
Well, depends on how you do it. Sometimes when I'm working on something, I might call up that person and say, hey, I'm working on this, do you mind if I mention you too? Or if you're just doing it as, sort of general knowledge, and I feel more like I'm reminding the reporter of something that they might have forgotten. I'm not saying that, or I might say, you could try talking to the local food pantry. I think they have a program, they might be willing to talk to you about it. So as long as you're not over-promising, I think it's okay, because if the reporter calls up the food pantry and they say, no, we're not willing to discuss that, they won't. Or sometimes it'll just happen, and then I might call them up and say, hey, by the way, I just mentioned this, and usually the answer is thank you, So unless you're saying something bad about them, but if you're just doing, if it's promotional, usually it's not a big deal, unless you have a bad relationship with them for whatever odd reason. Sometimes that happens.
I think we live in a world of collaboration. We have to. Everyone's asking, what are you doing to collaborate? So by saying, you might call Mrs. O'Brett.
Yeah.
It just says to the community again that we're not protecting, but we're really community building.
And that's real. It's a nice thing, and it does make the reporter more willing to write about you or to cover the story. Okay, so I have a bunch of tools that I mentioned. They're all available on the website, with the exception of the plan worksheet, which was supposed to be in your handouts, but seriously, you guys are smart people. I don't think you need it. You can probably make up something that works for yourself. Just think about when you're writing a plan, each month, think about tying it to what's going on in the world. If you have a publication that might have an editorial calendar, and you can get those by clicking on the Advertise With Us link, usually on their website. That's where they put it, because if you're going to buy an ad, you want to be in the issue that covers something that is of interest. So that's where you can get those. Or you can pretend you might want to take out an ad and ask them. The sales department is always more than happy to send you the editorial calendar, and as long as you're willing to say no about 200 times, you're totally fine. The social media strategy wheel, which we talked about a little bit. There's also the guidelines or policy template, which you might find helpful if you're trying to get more people in your organization involved with media relations or social media, because there are two ways that most organizations handle social media. One is they hire a really young person who knows the tool, but may not have the most professional standard of communication, and they have to be trained. Or you hire an older person who has the standard of communication but needs to learn the tool. Or you have a whole bunch of people doing it, in which case you need to make sure they're all doing the same thing. So this can help you write a policy that helps everybody understand how to be responsible when they are writing press releases or tweeting or Facebooking or whatever. Then there's also a reacting to social media flowchart, which can be good for any sort of public relations situation. It's a series of yes/no questions that you can ask yourself about, is the information that was put out there detrimental? Is it defamatory? Where did it originate from? Yes, no. It won't solve all your problems, but it at least gives you something to guide your thinking when you're freaking out. So. And then we took a survey on the use of social media among nonprofits. It was about a year ago, but you may find it informative. You can download that right from the homepage of the website. We worked with 19 other business owners. We got everyone to contribute 5 business building ideas and published a book called 100 Ways to Build Your Business in 2012. You can download that. You may find some really cool ideas in there. There's things about websites and social media and mobile and printing and leadership and all sorts of topics. We do a monthly newsletter, which I swear I'm not trying to sell you anything. Occasionally, if we do something we're really proud of, I will brag, just because we're excited. But it's informative. We blog, and we're also on Twitter. So I hope that you can get lots of ongoing tools from us. I promise I won't call you all up and hound you because I don't know who any of you are.
You're on Twitter, why would we want to be?
So you can follow me.
Oh, I mean,
Oh, I'm teasing you.
Would there be use of Twitter by a nonprofit?
You know-
I'm a dinosaur, so I ask you the question.
You know, here's the thing. I've been on Twitter for a long time, and originally I got into it because people were asking me about it, and I had to figure out what it was, so I got on it. I'm not a huge fan of Twitter. I think it's very random, and right now I think also there's a lot of ghost tweeting going on, so people use a tool to manage their tweets.
Politicians especially.
Yeah, and they set them up in advance and then don't actually monitor them. So people are putting out the information but not actually having the conversations that were supposed to happen. If you have somebody who can develop relationships with people and be active on it, it can be a great thing. I used to have someone on my team who left and went to a nonprofit who was great at it, and she works at Meta House, which is a nonprofit in Milwaukee. And she's very active on Twitter, and she's developed a lot of relationships with younger people, which is great. So if you have limited resources and can't decide what to do, I would say there's nothing wrong with tweeting your press releases or tweeting some news, but I wouldn't invest a ton of time in it. I'm a huge fan of Facebook, actually, for nonprofits. I really think Facebook is a much better platform for communicating with people because they're choosing to receive your message. It's less random. It's more interactive. I really like Facebook. I think Facebook offers a lot of opportunities for people.
I think that Twitter is a good way to communicate if you're trying to expand the younger demographic. You know, I'd say, 25 and up. So if you want to reach them, I would have someone, older that understands the Army and the services and the programs that we provide in our specific communities, learn the technology, because one of the workshops that is here today, I took it a couple of years ago on social media, and what you find with the social media and tweeting is it's a constant conversation. You have to constantly be engaged, and so you want to have someone assigned to it, kind of thing. And one of the things that I think would be effective is, even in a volunteer kind of way, to create a committee. How many of you have marketing committees? Okay, so if you have, or PR committees, or communications committees as part of your advisory board, that other arm that comes out from the advisory board, so you have this committee. But if you have these people on there and everybody has an assignment, and you may not be able to afford, someone, a social media person, then you can each assign, okay, you're gonna be tweeting this day, and the next day somebody else can tweet. Or the fun thing would be to create a tweet up committee, and have someone on that committee that knows about the Salvation Army programs and services, and then every day everybody is assigned a certain thing to talk about, leading up to your summer programming event, or leading up to Donut Day. How many donuts did someone eat today? How many donuts did you eat yesterday? What was the total giveaway of donuts? I mean, it's that kind of community.
You don't want Ashton Kutcher doing your tweet, Lauren.
Yeah, but it's the kind of thing that you have to be engaged in all the time. And I just started tweeting a year ago after going to a Salvation Army social media, personally tweeting, just so I could, be engaged and understand what's going on.
Who are you tweeting?
I don't know all those people.
And that's the thing. They have to choose to follow you.
Right.
So you can't, there's a difference. So email, you are pushing your information to people, and you know who those people are. Twitter, they're coming to you, and you may not know who those people are.
I can't veto them like on Facebook, for example. Right?
No, and you can't make someone subscribe to your tweets either.
Right. And all of a sudden, I don't know how I get people to tweet or to follow me, except if I ask you, are you on Twitter? Oh, will you follow me? I've gotten in the last week a couple new people following me, and I don't know what I
Sounds kind of
tweeted
desperate. I'm sorry.
that made them follow me, but I'm happy, that they are. Yes.
And I don't know if the same ladies here, and if you are, you can say. And then they say that they're not even saying who they are, that they really are them. So they're just lying, saying that they're not them because they don't want anybody to know it's them, but they're doing it. And I'm like, holy smokes, just write me a letter.
Yeah, which comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
Well, and there are some, depends on what you're trying to do. So it all goes back to
Exactly. I can
goals.
see the validity in
Right.
doing it because you're reaching a lot of people. I mean, even, the talk show host, just tweet me, just look me up at
Oh,
Facebook,
yeah.
and I'm like, just tell me now. I don't want to spend another half hour of my 30 days of my life, or 30 minutes of my life, trying to figure out what you're trying to tell me.
Well, one of the ways that I think that helped me, because I kind of had this personal goal, if I could just get someone to follow me, a new person once a week, during Christmas, that was kind of my goal, and it worked. But I think that it worked because I started following news people, and then I started following, community leaders, and so ever how many people follow them, see my tweet, and then they say, oh, I want to follow her. So
The other thing you
When
can
you
do.
say follow, what does that mean? Just understand,
That person gets your tweets.
right, they like an email. It's
what
like
kind of thing are you telling me on this tweet?
I might be telling you that we're preparing for our Christmas family feast day, and we're going to serve over 10,000 people a
Excuse me,
meal on
you're
Christmas
typing
Day. So I'm
right now?
typing this.
Okay.
So I'm typing this
Okay.
on Twitter.
I'm like, wait.
And the one thing how many people in here are on LinkedIn?
Fingerboarding it is what
Yeah.
you're doing.
LinkedIn. How many people use LinkedIn? I'm surprised. Okay. The thing, LinkedIn is a great, I'm amazed. You guys should all get on LinkedIn because it is professional networking. That's what
What
it
are you
is.
saying?
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, it's like a business Facebook.
It's like a business Facebook. And you
Like
put
LINKAIN.
Google
LinkedIn.
it. Google it.
But I couldn't hear what I was Google.
LinkedIn. Linked. Like a chain link fence.
Okay,
LinkedIn.
not
LINKED.
LINKED. LinkedIn. LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
Okay, so LinkedIn is a business networking site where you connect with people you know. So like Faith and I can be connected on LinkedIn. And then I can see who Faith knows. So you don't connect with people like on Twitter, random people. I don't know these people, they don't know me.
Yeah.
LinkedIn, you connect with people you know. So it's great for like donor cultivation and things like that. So now Faith and I are connected. And say I read an article about someone that I think would make a great client for my firm. So I go in and I search them on LinkedIn. Well, I have like 400 and something connections, and I actually know all these people. I do not connect with people on LinkedIn I don't know. And I discover that Faith knows this person. So then I send Faith an email and I say, hey Faith, I just read this article about so-and-so. How well do you know this person, and do you think they'd be willing to talk to me? And usually what happens is Faith writes back and says, I know him really well, here's his personal phone number, and tell him I said to call. And now I can pick up the phone and I can call this person. The reason I mentioned that is because you can connect your Twitter account to your LinkedIn account. And then you use your tweets to update your LinkedIn status, which puts you in the news feed every day that everybody who's connected to you reads. And so now you're in front of those people all the time. So I tell people to tweet just to update their LinkedIn account.
Right.
Yes. So that's that. I mean, because I do a lot of training for like attorneys and accountants and things like that, and people who don't care about these random connections, but they really want to build a specific type of network. So tweet to update your LinkedIn profile so that you show up in the news feed every day.
And you can link your tweet to your Facebook page, so then it saves you time, so you don't have to post on Facebook and then go post on Twitter. So if you say something, on Twitter, then it just automatically will post to your Facebook page.
Which is why when I'm on somebody's web page or when I'm looking at a news story, they've got all those funny little icons in the corner.
There you go.
All those pretty little weird pictures.
It'll be on Facebook via Twitter.
Yeah, and you don't have to be doing all of these things. I mean, there was a whole other session on social media, which is we've sort of deviated into that, but it's linked.
Because they're part of that integrated
Yeah, they're so
part.
connected. The important thing to know is to know a little bit about it. You don't have to do all of that social media stuff. Better to pick one platform and do it really well than to pick all of them and do none of them well. But tie it. Tie what you're trying to do in the media. Tie what you're trying to do when you're talking to the community. I mean, if it's a library flyer, you could still tweet that. you know, or put it on a Facebook page. Tie all of that stuff together. Try to be in as many places as possible because, like I pointed out, it's fragmented. The world is fragmented.
There was a time in the last decade or two where everybody was told, if you're going to have a web page, keep it current. Now you're engendering full employment for public relations folks with all these other platforms too, right?
Well,
And is the same rule apply? You better be current, you better pay attention if you got it.
it should be current, and it's honestly best handled internally. You know,
Right.
people will hire us when people hire us to do social media for them. We help them develop a policy. We help them put together a plan, and then usually we let them go, and they do it themselves, with the exception of blogs. But you know, tweeting and Facebooking is best handled internally because you post little things. You don't have to wait until you have big news. You post, we gave away 5 donuts today, or what, you know, or someone made a big, whatever.
Yeah.
Like little bitty things is what you post. Well, you don't want to have to call me every time that happens and then have me charge you for 15 minutes to do that. That's stupid. Just, you know, do it yourself or turn to somebody else. Take 5 minutes, you know.
Lisa had a question.
So as you go on, so, you know, I'm Mrs. Smith and I go on and I'm tweeting how, and I of course want to talk about the Salvation Army. So I want to talk about donor days, I want to talk about my blog, kind of, how are they going to associate me? So, you know what I mean, the Salvation Army, how did you do that?
I'll say, because when you sign up as on Twitter,
Right.
like you do on Facebook, you say who you are.
Okay.
So I'll send out, mine is Faith Colas, that's my Twitter name. And so I'll say, oh, I volunteered today at the Salvation Army Christmas Family Feast. If you'd like to, you know, sign up, visit www.samilwaukee.org. And then I send it.
And then that goes to your Facebook page.
It goes to my Facebook page. It goes to the people that are following me, it goes to my Facebook page, and then people see it, and then they'll like it or whatever.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anyone have any other questions?
Are we asking too many questions?
No, this is awesome. The last group asked like 2.
Can you remove people from Twitter? I mean, I've never been
That's a
on.
good question.
Because,
You can
what, I wasn't on.
You can
it for a while.
unfollow them.
You can unfollow them. You can't
Have them on.
block someone from following you, and you can remove a post. Like if you
You
had,
don't have control because I've got quite a few
Like if you-
questionable characters on
but-
there
but if you
That
have
follow you.
that follow you,
that did.
but it doesn't really matter. I mean, if they're just following you, who cares who they are?
Okay.
You know.
Can you start a second account if she's got that, if you've got a problem like that, where you think?
Yeah.
A lot of organizations have multiple
Is that
accounts.
standard MO?
Absolutely.
Like
You know,
in
they-
Start
Twitter?
another account.
Right, like, well, say you have a bunch of really big programs that you're trying to promote, you know, then you might have one account for that program and one account for another program because you're talking to different groups of people. You know, so it goes back to the goal. It all goes back to the goal and the plan. Remember, what did I say? When you leave here, if you have nothing else, social media and PR related, and have a plan, go home and write a plan.
You said this wasn't the social media seminar too. So
No, I know,
I'm
and
sorry
somehow
for
it
that.
turned into the social media seminar.
But
Because they're related, yes. You can't. You can't. I tried really hard not to talk too much about social media because I don't want to rain on the other guy's parade. But,
They didn't, we were in that one, they didn't talk about that much.
oh, okay, good.
It was a different approach.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
All totally.
Any more questions?
Anything else?
For Christina?
Awesome. All right, thank you. And feel free to download the tools.
So in front of you is a packet that is entitled How to Get Your Story Told. It's a media kit, and it'll give you the to-dos on what you need to do if you want to create a story idea. It gives you suggestions on how to create a story idea. The second page will give you media advisory how-tos. This morning, the reason, if you all know, Channel 9 came to our conference this morning, it's because last night I wrote a media advisory, I walked away from it, I double-checked it this morning, and then I identified all the local media here in Wausau because I don't have relationships with those folks. So I'm unfamiliar with who's who and what's what. And they actually watched the television and changed the channel to say, okay, that's channel 7, that's channel 9, you know. And then I went to the website and the internet and punched in Wausau television stations just to confirm what I was watching, you know, because sometimes you get, if you're real close, like Rhineland or something, you can get their television station. Of course, they might not come here for this. So I had to do some cross-referencing there. Then what I did was I took that media advisory and I emailed it to their newsrooms. And then at 9:15 this morning, I called them all to ask them if they received it. And I got Channel 9.
And I'll bet you put Mr. Butler's name in that release too, didn't you?
He was in the headline.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Right backwards.
He was in the headline. And that's kind of the formula that I used. And you'll see that on Media Advisory How To. It'll tell you, exactly how to do that. On the next page, it's hosting a media event. In Milwaukee, I've really had the pleasure of doing that twice, hosting a media event. When the economy started going belly up and there was a lot of news coverage on it, we had some organizations come to us and say, we want to partner. We want to do some resource fairs. We want to let people know about free tax support, so they can fill out their tax forms. We want people to know about the services that Salvation Army offers in Milwaukee. We have free recreational activities for families, and we don't know how to get that information out. So what we decided to do was a press conference. A press conference with all of these partners. We hosted it at our divisional headquarters. We had all the media come in because we did a really tight media advisory notice, and we made it possible for the media that did arrive to interview all the different partners that were part of the collaboration, because I think that's a new way of doing business now as a nonprofit, that you're not going to be able to stand alone to address all of the things that need to be addressed for families in need in whatever community you live in. And it was very, very effective. And from that point on, we had many community resources that we were able to host at Salvation Army facilities. What did that do? They got us in the news, that said that we're a team player in the community, that got all of our partners on board. Now we got relationships, so we can go back. If we want to do something bigger, we got some folks that we can go back to. And it brought people into Salvation Army facilities that may not have gone there unless they had a specific need. So it had, it had several outcomes, and we were very happy with those. And on the last page is top 10 tips for building a media list. You gotta have a media list. I got them all in my phone, and I know them all by first name now. I call them up, the newsroom, the whole bit. Hey, sometimes I call them based on a conversation that I had with them before that's totally unrelated to news. Somebody's pregnant, I want to know how you doing. How's the baby? Did you have a baby? Y'all having a baby shower? I'm building a relationship. I see them out in the street at the grocery store. I'm building a relationship. Hey, how you? Don't talk to them about what you're doing. So when you do talk to them about what you're doing, they're like fresh. They're like, oh yeah, I remember. Oh yeah, you said happy birthday to me. Oh, I send birthday cards to media people.
When you're in that line of work, how do you avoid being misconstrued as being crass or self-serving? I mean, they know what your job is.
That's my job.
You come across. I know, I understand that. But how do you avoid a misperception? It is a mutual relationship. But you still got to be careful they don't judge you in the wrong light, don't you?
I think you have to be genuine, and I think that's just part of your personality. You have the right people, and you have the right person as ambassadors talking for the Salvation Army, for your program. You genuinely are honest about what you're doing. I think that news reporters know, when you're not real, because every time you send me a different person from the Salvation Army to talk to me, then you're not real, That's part of that consistency. It's not just the message, but it's the messenger.
I think also too, if you're sending them something and they're not interested, be okay with that.
Absolutely.
Because then you're just trying to help them. And okay, it doesn't work. All right, fine, I'll try again. But if you try to ram it down their throat, then it does feel like a used car salesman kind of a thing.
Now you mentioned they misspelled your name, but as long as they spelled the business name, it was okay. There used to be a rule of thumb: if the reporter writes a story, don't look for some trivial correction and call up and write let it slide unless it's really, really an erroneous, bad thing. Is that still the rule?
That's my rule.
That's fine.
The general public doesn't see those little things.
Yeah, they don't care.
Yeah, they see a bigger picture,
Okay.
you know, and as long as you got the story right, you know. I'd rather you not even quote me, I'd rather you quote the major, but I hope you quoted him correctly. And I hope you talked about our program, and please put our website in the article, you know. So, yeah, I just kind of let those things go, because everybody makes mistakes. As a member of your divisional headquarters team, I am open and asking you to invite me to your core, your advisory board, to do one-on-ones, to talk about something specific in community relations or media planning or anything. One of the things that I did when I first came to the Salvation Army, so just so you know, here's my Salvation Army story. I started on November 5th, 2007. That was 2 weeks before we did our Red Kettle kickoff. Let me tell you how much I knew about the Salvation Army. The Red Kettles and disasters. But I didn't know that, you know, Red Kettle season was like fundraising, campaign, big season, you know, and so I jumped in right away, totally baptized in 2 weeks. Running all the way through the end of January, because we collect donations to the end of January. How many people know that? I've been with the Army for 4 years, and every year that I've been interviewed or I've talked to a reporter about how long our Christmas campaign, nobody picked up on it. But I still kept pitching it. Well, we take donations through the end of January. This year, CBS picked it up. And they called me back. I said, listen, you know, we take donations through the end of January, we're still down, blah, blah, blah. They said, oh, we didn't know that. I bet you a lot of people didn't know that. So they came in, they did an interview, and within that week, whatever the amount was that we were down, we were able to be up half of that. You see what I'm saying? So, and then from that point on, we developed a relationship with this young woman who does this segment on CBS called Making Milwaukee Great. So she says, Faith, call me anytime you have a story. Really? She's in my media plan. Like every quarter, I'm pitching her a story. So it might not be something that she'll use in that quarter, but she has it in her mind now. And so as media organizations do their planning and they meet daily, this might be something that they can go back to their pitch stories, because they keep all that information. On the desk, way in front by where Leroy Butler's display was, you'll find a pamphlet that speaks to the downturn and how it's impacting youth, the economy. And we did a national report on that. I sent it to media people, and nobody bid on it. I couldn't believe it. But you know why? Because Channel 12, during Sweeps Week, if you don't know about Sweeps Week, you gotta get in. You gotta have a story during Sweeps Week. We piggybacked on a story with Channel 12 that was doing a feature on the homeless children that attend Milwaukee Public Schools. Nearly 3,000 children that attend Milwaukee Public Schools are homeless. How many of those children do you think come through the Salvation Army?
Not enough.
So I called Joyce Garbaziak, and I said, Joyce, I understand you're doing this story. She goes, oh yeah, Faith. I says, we have a family. I didn't know this yet. We have a family at the emergency lodge with children, and they attend MPS. She says, I'd love to meet them. So then I called the emergency lodge to say, tell me you have a family whose children attend MPS. Because 9 out of 10 is what we do. We are going to have a family whose kids attend one of the public schools. And we did, and they were part of that story during Sweeps Week.
That's
I
awesome.
didn't have myself in that.
Yeah, you should.
That was just great. I mean, and they do these stories specifically for that. So now my conversation with the news assignment editors is, what are your plans for Sweep Week? What kind of stories are you working on? maybe there's a fit, in there for us. And that's just all in building the relationship, with them. Get on a first name basis, write their name down, keep up with that kind of thing. Follow them on Twitter, one of Portia Young just had a baby.
Mhm.
So I tweeted her one morning, because I thought she was getting kind of big there, and I didn't know she was pregnant. She was just getting kind of big there, and she says, "Oh, I'm due in 3 weeks." And I thought, "Oh, this is great," So I tweeted her, and she tweeted me back. And it's a non-work kind of thing, but you can have, that can help build your relationship. I have cards here up front if you'd like for me to come to your core, or your advisory board meetings. I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to tell you the effective ways to write, news releases. We can talk about that. We can talk about your communicating with the intent to sell, how important that is. Just kind of piggyback on things that Christina talked about that are specific to your core or your advisory, your advisory board goals in terms of communication. Identify PR organizations in your community. There's the Public Relations Society of America. They probably have a chapter in every city. Get to know those folks. Ask those folks to sit on your committees. Pick their brains. Get them to volunteer for you. Cross-market, as Christina was talking about, be sure that you're integrating everything that you're doing, looking at your plan. Have some folks come in and say, "Hey, this is our plan, take a look at it. This is what we're doing." And building those relationships. Don't forget, before you leave, to fill out your survey. Your feedback is real important to us. What we didn't cover here, maybe you want us to cover in a future conference, we're happy to do that. Maybe it's something that I can talk with you one-on-one by coming to your core.
Can I just add something a minute? I'm not sure that I'm not stretching what we're doing in this seminar, but we were able to go to the marketing and graphics classes at our technical college, and they laid out 5 different plans for a brochure for our core, and we were able to pick what we liked and then do it, and now Harvey's runs 10,000 of them off for us every year. So we put one of those oftentimes in our donor thank you notes. We take them out to presentations, and people have just called and said, "I didn't know you did this stuff."
All the time.
The second thing is, because I have such a good relationship with the media, and I've been blessed to be in wonderful cities that have had, but I missed it in Waukesha because Milwaukee has most of our news. But because I send news releases all the time, they called and said, "We want to do an article about you." Because they think the Salvation Army is a peculiar organization and who's inside of that organization, which you could even highlight any of your advisory board members or volunteers. So I answered these questions thinking, oh, they're just going to pick a couple. They did the whole article, like a 2-page front picture, everything. And because of that, several churches called because one of their things was, "What are your greatest challenges?" And I said, "Following the Lord's plan for my life and delivering the services that the Salvation Army is well known to deliver." So I have spoken probably 7 times just because of that article.
Oh, that's great.
So, people are like, "Well, we didn't know you'd even come out and speak to our groups."
That's a great best practice.
Yeah.
That
It was
is.
fun.
To reach out to the technical schools in your community.
Yes.
That's really a great practice. I mean, one of the other things that we do that I've kind of charged myself with is at every event that comes into Milwaukee at the convention center, they have to have someone give the invocation or benediction. So I've become friends with people at our visitors bureau to say, if you know that there's someone that's coming in to our city and they need, a minister, a person of God to give the invocation or benediction, please give me a call. The Salvation Army would love to do that and represent our city. So that's just another way. These are small things, but they get the Salvation Army out into the public so that we don't look like you have to just always be coming to us, that we are coming into the community, and we're doing all we can across the board to do that. That's a great best practice. You guys see me now.
It's old now, it's a dartboard picture.
That's okay, I love to read that.